Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spiral Dynamics Integral Live. Today we have Paul Kirst giving a presentation for us on human systems dynamics. This is something that I know very little about, so I'm very excited to hear more about it. We also have some representatives from the Human Systems Dynamics Institute, which is fantastic, and many other members who have joined us today who have some understanding or are working with human systems dynamics. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation, Paul. So I hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. As I said earlier, my name is Paul Kirst. I do straddle two worlds. I am a founder of this particular little group, which was started at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And I've also been involved with the human systems dynamics world. I'm on the board of directors of the Institute, and I'm professionally trained associate. So I'm part of the Associates Network. So let me just dive right in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present human systems dynamics in the context of spiral dynamics. And my subtitle is an effective set of tools for the aspiring spiral wizard. Now, before I get into it, I've noticed that ever since I first was introduced to spiral dynamics and the term spiral wizard, which I think was coined by Don Beck, maybe Claire Graves. But I've often wondered if there wasn't created a little bit of a gendered bias by coining the phrase spiral wizard. Don't know if it has or not, but I would like to officially.
For sure, Graves was actually from the old 1950s school of women's place.
Okay. So,
but spiral
anyway,
wizards is Don's terminology.
So I would like, if there is any gender bias in there, I would like to officially correct that. And I'm going to introduce the concept of the spiral.
Cool.
So a spiral wizard is a change agent that is adept, and this comes right out of Don Beck's book. This is a change agent that's adept at working within the complex world of the 8-layered spiral. And ultimately their goal or their mission is to promote the overall health of the entire spiral. And that is their main guiding principle. He or she thoroughly understands all 8 V-memes and intuitively knows how to lead people within each V-meme sphere of influence. They can guide people within a given V-meme from unhealthy functioning to healthy functioning. A spiral wizard understands the transitional cusps within and between V-memes and how to move between one and the next, and is comfortable and proficient working with highly complex human systems, and they can effectively lead people and organizations through wicked life condition changes. Again, this is straight out of the book Spiral Dynamics. So here's the 7 marks of a spiral dynamic wizard, again, according to Beck and Cohen. A spiral wizard thinks in open systems rather than closed final states. Spiral wizards live and work within natural flows and rhythms. The ultimate goal of the spiral wizard is to keep the entire spiral, healthy. A spiral wizard interacts comfortably with many conceptual worlds. They possess a full complement of resources, strategies, and skills, are systemic thinkers and integrative problem solvers. And a spiral wizard possesses a unique blend of personal beliefs and values. It's a very powerful tool for understanding just how the world works. And I want to emphasize on the tool and the fact that it's a model. It's a map. It's not the territory. It's great at analyzing the deeper elements of a challenging situation. It can give useful insight into the hidden currents that circulate through a situation, which gives clarity as to what is going on in the situation. It can give helpful understanding of how the dynamics of a situation interact, which helps to determine the significance of what is going on. It can give some vision of what lies ahead in a situation. But there's still a lot more understanding and skill that need to be brought to bear on a situation in order to actually do something about it. A thorough understanding of spiral dynamics model would certainly help you acquire some of the 7 marks of a spiral wizard. The ultimate goal of a spiral wizard is to keep the spiral healthy. Understanding the spiral will obviously help you do that. A spiral wizard needs to be a systemic thinker and integrative problem solver. And a spiral wizard does certainly possess a unique blend of personal beliefs and values. It can give some insight into what's going on. It can chart a course that what should happen next, what needs to change. Those of you who are familiar with the model, this spiral dynamics change profile is very familiar. What spiral dynamics does not do is tell you how to actually bring about the change that's talked about. It does not dive deeply into the specifics of change processes. Spiral dynamics is a powerful strategic analysis tool, but it offers less in the way of what I call in the trenches tactical tools. A spiral wizard needs to catalyze change processes all along the spiral. To do this, an effective spiral wizard needs to wield more than just a spiral dynamics wand. The bulk of the work that a spiral wizard is done in those 2 points, that beta tension and the gamma crash points. And that work is done with groups of people, oftentimes from differing worldviews within the group, and all trying to navigate a set of difficult life changes and navigate it together. But what exactly does a spiral wizard do while working with those groups? What tools and methods and methodologies can he or she use in addition to spiral dynamics to work the magic? So just exactly what is the spiral at the most basic level? It shows there are different human societal worldviews that interact on the planet. It shows that those different worldviews pass back and forth between a focus upon individual self-agency and one upon collective relational collaboration. And it shows that the first 6 worldviews have emerged for the purpose of survival, and the emerging 2 are purpose towards being. It evolved over time in response to changing life conditions into increasingly complex forms. Those are the specific details of the model. And I guess I'd like to propose that at its most basic level, the spiral, human society, is revealed patterns that are emerging from a complex adaptive system that has evolved over time and is still evolving. So in 2002, Don Beck gave an interview, and he defined a V-meme as V-memes are not types of people, but are forms of adaptive intelligences in people. Different people possess different fragments or components or even visions. And this makes the formulation of what I call creative brain syndicates, with insightful interactions and dialogues even more important. In saying that, a V-meme is an adaptive intelligence in people. Dr. Beck puts a strong and important emphasis upon the skills that those people have acquired and perfected. A spiral wizard isn't just a person, he or she is a person who is capable of employing many different skills. So this is a kind of a look at what the basic yellow thememe is. And in fact, it's called the flex flow thememe. It's flexible adaptation to change in systems through connected big picture views. In a sense, I believe adaptive action is at the heart of flex flow, the ability to creatively and dynamically adapt to your life conditions. And there are a lot of commonly known methods and tools that show up in the spiral dynamics world. Obviously, value matches spiral dynamics assessment tool is one of them. Adizes' coalesced to power, authority, and influence is another. Barry Johnson's polarity management has shown up a lot. And the whole concept of sense making is circulated a lot in the spiral dynamics integral world. And what I'd like to talk about today is what I would call a less well-known but powerful model or set of tools, and that is human systems dynamics. So what exactly is human systems dynamics? Well, it was developed in the late 1990s by Dr. Glenda O. Young. It melds together the findings that have come out of complexity sciences and the social sciences. It works with wicked problems by seeing that as complex adaptive systems, observing, analyzing, understanding, and influence the patterns that emerge from the complex adaptive systems. And the HSD model itself is an extensive set of tools, extensive set of robust principles, methods, and tools that allow a change agent or spiral dynamic wizard or sorceress to discover and influence the patterns that are arising out of the context that they are working within. It bridges the gap between analyzing and understanding a problematic situation and systemically exploring, designing, and implementing possible solutions. The core of the system itself is what we call the HSD theory of change, is to view a wicked problem as being a complex adaptive system in need of attention. And it looks deeply into it to see and understand the patterns that are emerging from it, which are setting the conditions for the system's self-organizing aspects and elements, and then applying a set of iterative adaptive action steps to influence the patterns and bring about change to the entire complex adaptive system. So again, a complex adaptive system views all human systems as being self-organizing groups of people interacting within the system, and that out of that, patterns emerge from the interactions within the complex adaptive system. The patterns can be understood, observed and understood, and it's possible to apply pattern logic through inquiry and thorough inquiry in order to understand the system. Once understood, those patterns can be influenced but not controlled, because the patterns that emerge from a complex adaptive system can be influenced. It's possible to influence and change this complex adaptive system itself. So in a sense, it starts with the basis of applying what's called pattern logic. And you do this in order to gain a deeper understanding of the complex adaptive system in question. You observe the similarities, differences, and connections that are present within the complex adaptive systems. You use the knowledge gained from the observations to shift and change the patterns, influence the outcomes of the complex adaptive system through the process of working with the patterns itself. And you do that by using pattern logic, which is at the core of the HSD model. You then apply that to this adaptive action planning, provides an iterative process of seeing the patterns in the environment, planning for change, taking specific change actions, rescanning the environment to see what is needed next, and then repeat the process. So again, it's in this process of what, so what, now what. It is repeated potentially over and over again. And the reason that the strength comes with its iterative nature is the fact that a lot of these processes, these are incredibly complex. And it's virtually impossible to really understand and work with a deeply complex problem if you use the traditional Western style of rush to a solution, argue endlessly and vigorously about which quote unquote perfect solution to apply, and then move to implementation. It's a long iterative process. It's not a quick one. And in the midst of this, and how to do this is the process that we call inquiry. And it's to understand, you inquire deeply in order to understand what's going on in the complex adaptive system. So you first deeply inquire into it. And you do this to determine a course of action to take and to stay on course, then continue to inquire. And you do this by asking lots of questions and you listen. You do through the questions, you draw out the patterns and dynamics in the system. During this process, you suspend judgment. You don't jump to conclusions about what you are seeing emerge. You stay in that place long enough to turn judgment into curiosity, turn conflict into shared exploration, turn defensiveness into self-reflection, and to turn assumptions into more questions. Because it's that judgment, that conflict, that defensiveness, and those assumptions that oftentimes that are resident in every human interaction, every human group, that gets the problem, that really sets the stage and gets the solution, makes the solution more difficult. It's breaking that judgment and those conflicts that needs to take place. And you keep the process up. So what you've got is, at its core, it's this HSD theory of change, which incorporates the concept of complex adaptive systems, conditions for self-organizing, and then an adaptive action process to bring about the change. And you surround that with inquiry, inquiry, inquiry. Now, around that, and this is where the real strength of the model starts to show up, or the theory, is it's around that human systems dynamics has surrounded that core change theory with a whole lot of models. First of all, there's this Ouyang CDE model, which really gets at the elements to be influenced but not controlled. We utilize the landscape diagram, which determines the nature and scope of the system's level of complexity. And in the midst of all that, we're constantly applying simple rules of what informs actions when control is not possible and regulation doesn't work. So the Ouyang model, change model, determines the three conditions that influence how self-organization takes place in a complex adaptive systems. And these three influences, the container, the differences in the exchanges, these conditions influence the speed, the path, and the direction of pattern formation within the system. You change any condition and the system will change. You can influence that change, but you can't control it. And again, the landscape diagram, it's a simple graph that provides a picture of the lay of the land within any complex system. It illustrates the necessary differences in activity across an adaptive system, and it provides a way to see the patterns that form in the system as people shift between agreement and certainty. It lets a change agent scope out just how wicked the wicked problem is. Again, as you can see, you move from a more where there's a lot of agreement and a lot of certainty. You have a very stable situation, and plan and control work very well. As you move out to less and less agreement and certainty, you have a very unstable, complex adaptive system, and you're constantly seeking for patterns and trying to find ways of influencing those patterns. And the simple rules establish patterns of interaction and decision-making that govern individual and group behavior towards coherence of the system. And the simple rules are at the foundation of a human system, are generally unspoken, and they influence the system in ways that are not recognized by its members. And it's arriving at these simple rules. That's why its inquiry becomes so important. Once the simple rules of a particular human system are identified, a change agent can guide and influence interactions and decision-making. So we've got the basic theory, we've got some of the major components that surround that, but HSD also adds additional concepts, techniques, and tools to further clarify the situation and to probe deeper in this process of ongoing inquiry. There's the concept, we introduced the concept of independent pairs, the four truths, the idea of a decision map, conflict circles, stretch and fold, and same and difference. All conflicts within any situation arise from the differences between the realities of the situation and the stories the participants tell themselves about the realities. And those realities and stories are in fact represented by four different truths. So you've got this four truths, and it's those four truths that really, in a sense, fuel the conflict that goes on in the situation. Independent pairs plus same and different combined are very similar to polarity management. That stretch and fold is a natural, stretching is a natural tendency within a system to push against boundaries. As that pushing takes place, tensions build up within the system, and resistance to the stretching eventually becomes so great that the stretching stops. And in order to release that tension, you fold it back in on itself. And this is a technique that's used within HSD to actually manage and manipulate that natural process of stretching and folding that goes on within a complex adaptive system. In a decision map, all decisions are made within a group context, must come out of an understanding that there are underlying realities and rules that apply, and there are differing worldviews among the participants. And those worldviews will shape their individual beliefs about and their approaches to the underlying realities and rules. I personally believe that the power of the model comes from the depth and the breadth of the multiple methods and tools that human systems dynamics does and can and does bring to bear on any problem. Being able to approach a wicked problem or situation, not from a political or an ideological perspective, but from the perspective of the science of complex adaptive systems. It provides a deep understanding of what a complex adaptive system is and how it functions. And it gives the practitioner a number of methodologies to probe and understand the workings and inner workings of a complex adaptive systems. The methodologies themselves are designed to allow for long and deep probing so that very complex systems can be fully understood. It also provides a breadth of tools to analyze and influence the patterns that arise from the complex adaptive system. Influence the patterns, and you can influence the systems itself. So the question then, is human systems dynamics the best tool for a spiral wizard? Most likely not. Not the best. Just like it takes a wide variety of tools to build a house in order to serve the breadth of a whole spiral, a good wizard needs a lot of different tools to be the most effective. HSD is indeed a uniquely powerful and effective set of methods and tools that can greatly enhance the capabilities of a spiral wizard. It can also be even more powerful when mixed and matched with other proven and effective integral models and tools. A really good wizard or sorceress has numerous tricks up his or her sleeve. So, thank you. I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Paul.
Did anybody time that? I never did figure out exactly how long it took. Guess it doesn't make
Less
any
than-
difference.
Maybe 45 minutes or so.
Standard.
So is the idea now to do a question and answer, although we have a lot of other experts in the group, or should we do breakout groups, or what?
You know, I thought about doing a breakout, but mostly because I thought we were going to have a lot of experts. I think it would probably be more useful just to do questions and answers and comments. I guess
Zafir has his hands up. I think we're going to do the little hand thing.
Thank you very much, Paul. It was a lot of information, and it will really help me to hear, or if you can describe one example of inquiry and how you use the method.
I was thinking the same thing, Zafir. I'd love some examples, some real world examples.
Well, I guess I will defer to Glenda because I've got one or two, she's got hundreds.
Sure.
So I'm happy to share one, Paul. First, thank you. That was really a lovely condensation of the work. I really appreciate it. Seeing it just is a pattern and bringing forth the containers and differences and exchanges that hold it. Yeah, we've got hundreds of patterns. One I'm working with now is an international group that supports collaboration and ecosystems engagement across nonprofits globally. Nonprofits and funders, governments and individuals establishing support for collaborative action, including public health and climate change, many things. They're a startup, and so like many startups, they're kind of running around in circles. They have some theoretical grounding, but they're three very different threads of theory, one from psychology, one from economics, and one from spiritual practice. And those three are somewhat coherent, but not clearly connected. And they're growing really quickly because they have an audience and there's a massive demand. So when they began to talk with us, they were trying to use their tools in bits and pieces to bring the core team together and to develop processes and procedures to help their clients organize. So when I first went, what I was looking for were what are the containers, what are the differences, and what are the exchanges? There was a set of containers that were conceptual, these three that I mentioned. There was a container of an executive committee that was very closed, open and sensitive and wanting to hear all voices, but essentially they held all the decision making. And there was a great deal of question about what the boundaries of the organization were, where it ended and the rest of the system started. So those were the C's that I saw. The differences that I saw were the level of urgency about making change in the world, the different perspectives of the collaborators they were trying to bring together, and the kind of non-Western way that they were trying to be. So there are many aging, white, male Westerners wanting to reach into a much more open method, but they were a bit stuck on that. And then exchanges, there was a lot of opinionating from all the different places and not much listening. So that was the pattern I saw at the beginning. So what we did was first to interview the staff members, which is kind of a standard OD intervention, to get a better picture of the pattern, because the pattern we saw came to us through members of the senior management team. So we needed to get a better picture of the system. So we interviewed folks. As we did that, we realized their individual contributions were the most important things to them. For them, the organization was just a mechanism for them to be able to do the work they really wanted to do. And so that was one thing we saw. We saw that the differences that made a difference to them were quite variable, depending on where they were and what context they were in. They were very context oriented and wanted to be connected to context. And we realized that they all held really strong opinions, quite opinionated. So that was the pattern that we saw then. So there were three things that we did. The container intervention that we did was to bring all of the staff together in inquiry, talking specifically about their mission. They had never had a mission statement of any use, but we used the mission statement as a container to amplify differences that existed and set up an exchange across the board. So that process, which is still ongoing, is incredibly messy, but it is incorporating all the voices. We're using that as a mechanism for transformation. The second thing that we did was to bring inquiry practice into the space. So to invite them in what we call the power of questions, so that those experts in all their various places learn better how to listen and to redefine their issues in the larger scope. And then the third thing that we're doing is going back to their three theoretical grounds and building a set of simple rules with, of course, all their engagement, so that they'll have 4 to 6 simple rules that shape their behavior. But that was the way that we saw the patterns, talking with senior management, talking with the staff. We understood them in terms of the containers that were holding them together, the differences that informed their action, and the exchanges that they had. And then our interventions shifted those conditions to shift the pattern. Does that help as an example?
Yes, it helped, but it's like, for me, it sounds like most of the work is very similar to like creating a vision in DNA to a company. It's like, or to a organization. Of course, I don't know if you are doing it. Is this part of the process, creating this vision for the organization?
Not always, not always. So our interventions always depend on the current pattern in the organization. That's the first thing. So there's not a standard intervention that we use. Each time it's different. The second thing is that, yes, all of the different tools that are used to shape human systems, whether or not they're labeled HSD, they are shifting containers, shifting differences, and shifting exchanges, we believe. And so we pull in all kinds of tools. That's the way we think of integral, in fact, is that integral at each altitude, each level, each of the spirals, is a certain set of containers that are privileged, a certain set of differences that make a difference, and a kind of exchange that is most effective. And that when you move from one level to the next, what you're doing is privileging different containers, using different exchanges to see different differences. And so it can, in that transition, that messy transition from one spiral to the next, can support that. And I'm going to pause now and give it back to Paul for ongoing.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Marjorie, why don't you go next?
Okay, so I'm absolutely no expert at all, but I am a member here locally in Greenville, North Carolina, of a modern witchcraft neo-pagan group that has been around for about 10 years, but has restructuring itself after the pandemic. And my friend Michelle Jenkins wrote a book called Elemental Witchcraft, Living a Magical Life Through the Elements. And so as a member of this group here locally, and I have no one here locally to talk to about spiral dynamics or integral at all. This is a very conservative town here in North Carolina. And just briefly, my interest is how to kind of forget what I know or put in the background what I know about spiral dynamics and integral and come on into this group as a member at the level of where the group is at and be an actual member at this level, and then see what I see and see if I have any influence, just see where this is going. And it has great potential. The interest is there. They truly are interested in finding ways that humanity can survive, first of all, and thrive. And spiral dynamics and integral theory also does the same thing. So I guess if I have a question as to how do you kind of forget what you know? How do you go into, come back down into blue, even purple ways of looking at the world from an integral perspective and just come on back down in there and be there?
Yeah.
And then just kind of observe.
Yeah. So Paul, if I can, the most simple and most powerful pattern spotter we use is called same and different. And so if you brought those three into a room and asked them, how are you all the same? And how are you different? You'll see a pattern and you'll have a pathway forward. The similarities, you can say, we can amplify those and feel ourselves more together. And the differences, you can say, what do we have to learn from each other across these differences? Which are the differences that support or challenge the work? So as long as you're inquiring into the system with neutral questions, you neutralize or put aside for a moment your prejudices. So
Yes.
that's same and different is like our go-to fast see a pattern tool. So I'm curious what you talked about with them, how they're same and different. I'm very curious.
Thank you. I guess what I'm challenged is, and I find this also in the integral world, is that even though we're second tier and we're integral, there is I guess a shadowy aspect of it that we in general feel that integral is the best. And that is anti what integral should be or supposed to be. And integral, in my opinion, it would be that that every level has its worth and its beauty and its contribution to the world, and that integral is one of those and has transcended and included everything that has come before. So how do I've noticed myself a tendency to want to share some stuff that I know from, my perspective, and the little bit of time that I've done that has not, they just kind of goes right through them or past them or whatever, so I have to watch that tendency within myself to kind of feel like, well, I know something that they don't know and I want to teach it, or, all of that is like, no, and so that's the challenge that I'm also finding for myself. Thank you. I am complete. Thank you.
Barbara.
Two questions, Paul. The first one is Braver Angels that you and I both have sometimes worked with doesn't see working with the systemic problems, right? They're into the touchy-feely segment of it. They're into the same different, but they're not into to ever questioning the system. And so have you talked to anybody there about trying to use something that looks more at system dynamics? And then I'll let you answer that and then go to the second one.
You're talking about at Braver Angels?
Yeah.
I never, no, I have not, and the little, I haven't been as deeply involved as you have been. But
Well, I haven't either, Paul. I keep stepping back because they're stuck in their differences still, you know, and not in looking at the system, the polarities of the polarity system of their differences, right?
right.
And then Marjorie, real quick, I'm going to tell you, I've worked in the integral community for a long time, and I don't see any tendency to inclusion. They may or may not have transcended, but there's an, especially among the lower V means, there's a whole lot of exclusion and a whole lot of folks that have not coped with that. But my second question, Paul, is, and the reason I said that is my second question is, and I think somebody mentioned this, that it was a bunch of old white guys trying to get out of their what we might call orange business suits, and that's my take of your very brief description. But you know, I'm thinking of things like the Middle East, where we have purple red fanatics murdering women because they dared to say that maybe they wanted an education, right? Do you guys have any thoughts as to whether there's any way to make inroads in those kinds of toxic systems with something like this? It works in U.S. inner cities, but that's because we have a Western container that sort of assumes that most of us assume you don't murder your neighbor because they have a different religion. In the Middle East, not so much, right? So kind of, have you even thought of it? Do you think it's possible to use it in those kinds of systems?
Well, I'll give a very brief answer to that, and then I'll turn it over to, you know, Glenda or Royce or Marie or Michael, who are more practiced at it. And my very brief answer is, I hope so. I see glimmerings the more I learn about, particularly about the process of inquiry. I'm hopeful. And please, Glenda, Royce, Michael, Marie, chime in.
Michael, I'm curious, and Marie, I'm curious what you're saying about that. Well, the short answer is yes. We believe it's helpful and we've seen it be helpful. It's quite useful in high tension, high violent situations. That's just the short answer. And I'm curious, Marie and Michael, what your reflections are.
I don't work in that space very much, honestly, so I don't feel qualified to answer that. I certainly see it as effective as a as an understanding tool that's deeply useful to a system without.
But that assumes that the ideology doesn't preclude understanding of any contrary viewpoints, right?
Yeah.
And some of the rabid stuff in the Middle East, I'm not sure there's a starting point between I'm going to shoot you if you take your veil off.
Yeah.
And I'd like not to be murdered today. Thank you.
Yeah, I can give you a couple of pretty simple examples. So one of our colleagues in Israel established a business in which Israelis were doing construction business. Israelis were doing design and Arabs were doing construction. And they built this container of a business that crossed over the line, so that the container was built so that the differences that made a difference were the propensities and the skills of the people involved, and the exchange was an economic one. And it wasn't that then they loved each other and had the same religion or even cared what the other one was, but finding that kind of a container and understanding that that's what's happening. So that's one example. Another tactic, which another one of our associates uses, not there, but in South Africa, is to separate the two tension spaces within each one to say, what's the worldview that's holding us? What are the rules that drive the work we do? And what's our reality? And then they get that clear within each side because they're not homogeneous, right? So the thing is, the arguments within each side were much more virulent than the ones between because they were getting straight. Once they did, then they came together to report, this is our worldview, this is ours, this is our reality, this is ours, this is our set of rules, and this was ours. And then they could say, so where do we overlap? Same and difference again. So where do we overlap and how can we build a foundation on that? And so the idea here is that it's difference within the system that drives the transformation. It isn't anything that comes from outside that drives the transformation. Now, if you want,
However, both your
Mhm.
containers are Western containers. And I've seen really good stuff done by spiral dynamics folks in Israel, Palestine, using that and using the spiral dynamics difference in levels. If I want to go to Syria, to Iran, to Iraq, where these things, nobody there is going to accept a Western container for their fundamental problems solving.
So both
right?
of these were local people using local language, local resources, and local issues.
It's
They
a
don't.
business, so it's a Western container. So that's one
So
thing I really see as a problem with a lot of our Western interventions. We assume that a Western container, if we introduce it, will work, and it will if people are ready for it. But I wouldn't see that in the toxic parts of the Middle East as being something useful.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
think, Barbara, there you've got your answer. If the system doesn't want to change, then it won't change.
Right.
Or it won't change in a way that we in the West, from upper tier thinking, envision change happening, right? So wow, that is an aha for me. Maybe our vision of what change should look like is sometimes wrong, and we need to just let it emerge from them on their own because we can't help.
Yeah, that's the humility piece. It is not about us.
Right.
It is about the system. And if we're not able to get out of our own pride, if we can't stand in humility and really inquire about what is, then there's no way we're going to be able to influence it.
Yeah, but we see them as future markets.
See who is future markets?
Well, the areas that Barbara just talked about. So obviously we can't stop but influencing these areas because we want them to change, because they're of economic interest to us.
My
But
experience,
sorry,
my experience these days is that we're needing to learn from those places, that our Western perspective needs to see and understand the gifts that are brought to us by the non-Western perspective. And that's the effort that we do, is try to learn what they know about pattern formation, self-organizing, to bring it in. So for us, the learning goes mostly this direction. It also goes the other way, and we try not to exploit or misuse. But yeah, sorry, I'll be quiet now.
Risa, let me respond to that, and then your hand is up. The big strength that I've found in HSD is that because it is based not in an ideology, in a political ideology, in an economic ideology, it's based in something that's totally natural, and that's a complex adaptive system, a self-organizing complex adaptive system. That's what planet Earth, that's what the universe is at its core. And I've found that trying to approach problems from that perspective at least holds more potential than the traditional Western of we know what we want to do, and we're going to plan how to implement it. And that's where I think a lot of the problems arise in the world today, is that, and because it's this ideological, economic, political, neutral approach of it's a complex adaptive system that gives HSD its strength and also holds, at least in my opinion, holds some hope that it's a tool that can be effectively used to nudge the planet in the right direction. Go ahead, Reese.
Thank you. And when I looked at your presentation and the operating logic of HST, then I very much saw reiterative processes, self-empowerment, appreciative inquiry. And that very much reminded me of a lot of facets of agile development. Do you see similarities there as well?
Maria, chime in, please. Maria is an associate who works in agile development.
I'm so sorry, Paul, but I will defer to Michael.
Okay.
Mhm.
Reese, your question is basically a connection between HSD and agile development.
Yeah, with regard to the operating logic, the way you work.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Agile has very clear, coherent containers. Team 7 ±2. They have a very clear bounded process. They have very clear ceremonies. So it's easy to see why and simple rules, right? That create emergent effects. So it's like you used HSD to structure Agile in a certain way.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Makes
Niche.
perfect sense in today's world.
Niche.
Hi, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Glenda. I've got a question actually, which was triggered by something Glenda said about 10 or 15 minutes ago. If when we're looking at a particular system or a particular territory, and we're analyzing that territory to draw, or in our minds, containers, differences, exchanges, is the way in which we will actually do the analysis of that territory, where we draw the containers, differences, and exchanges, is that to some degree influenced by the center of gravity or altitude of the person doing the analysis? So, and as we ascend the spiral, will we draw more complex containers, differences, and exchanges, which would then potentially lead us to formulate deeper and more complex solutions and strategies? And hopefully that question makes sense.
It does, and I think that's right. The thing that we need to remember is that the solution action, so HSD is really more about action than it is about understanding. And so since the action has to happen in the system, then the interpretation needs to be at the stage and in the context that the system participants can understand so they can act on it. We do them no help when we come in and describe a very complex solution they will not be able to understand or implement. And so that's part of the challenge of the intervention, is to find what is the potential now for taking action to move to wherever it might be. And in systems that are more complex, it's easier to get more complex understanding, therefore action, more subtle action.
Niche, let me chime in here. It's that fit to function aspect of human systems dynamics that I saw that made it especially useful for the potential spiral wizards, spiral sorceress, because again, the mission of a spiral wizard is the health of the spiral, and it's to recognize that every level is important, and going into a purple blue situation with a bunch of green or yellow solutions is not going to get you anywhere. You have to have purple blue solutions. And again, that's what looking at the system totally neutrally, just the system as a system, let the system tell you what it is the strength of, and all the tools that HSD brings to bear on that process is why I personally believe it's one of the stronger tools that can be used.
And would one center of gravity need to be, are we talking about a center of gravity of yellow in spiral dynamics terms before we can really be spiral wizards in that sense? And if we're dealing with systems that have to be adapted to, like you gave the example, say purple rather than orange or green, would the way we analyze that system and come up with action then necessarily be simpler and less complex?
I'll weigh in and say yes. I think that's at the core of what Don Beck was trying to get at when he defined spiral wizard, is that you deal with the center of gravity. You're dealing with using their language, framing it in a solution that works for them. And I mean, I don't think anybody has a detailed understanding of what a spiral wizard or spiral sorceress really is, but that's at the core of it. It's being able to do that is what defines a spiral wizard for me.
But Don's analysis was never simpler. What he showed the group he was working with was simpler, right? So in other words, you're looking at the whole universe that second tier can see, and then Don would pick the sections that that he thought the participants could actually deal with.
Right. Josh, thanks for the questions, Nish.
Thank you.
Josh.
Yeah, so I like the model. I think it's really interesting. I was mostly drawn to the inquiry component, and I was wondering if somebody could post those steps or have the link directly to that. And on top of that, I'm wondering at the end of this, like at 10 or whatever, if anyone's interested in doing breakouts where we would practice that, because I think the issue would be like, okay, here's the inquiry steps for the issue that's a really hot button issue that is so important to me, whatever. It's going to be hard to do that versus, all right, here's an issue that's some random drill or something I don't care about as much. I feel like I'd be better at practicing those steps before taking them into real life circumstances. So if anyone's interested in attempting that, I think that could be fun. Okay.
Interesting that you say that, Josh. I had actually prepared a breakout session, simple exercise using the OYANG-CDE model. I've got some slides I can pull up to show that could be used by the group.
Okay.
If there's interest.
So so Royce just sent that link. So yeah, that's the turning judgment into curiosity, disagreement into shared exploration, defensiveness into self-reflection, assumptions into questions. So yeah, those are all things I try to practice, I'd like to think, but I'd like to practice more mindfully. So this is a helpful model. So thanks for that.
It's a simple concept. It's very hard to do.
We have a daily practice that either Paul or Michael or Marie can tell you about, where we practice inquiry every day together, open group.
And as a participant in it a number of times with my own wicked issues, the effect of it is like ventilating an impossible situation. I mean, it's just really relieving and sort of it takes you out of your stuckness in it and helps you just see differently. And you know, you don't even necessarily do something different immediately afterwards, except for reflect, because it changes your it's like opening a window on a stuffy room.
Yeah, just to describe what the process is as Glenda said, it meets 5 days a week, every weekday, 10 o'clock Central Time. And it's structured as somebody brings a wicked issue. And then the group, whoever shows up, asks questions. They don't give opinions. They don't give solutions. They just ask questions surrounding that wicked issue. And then after meets for a half hour, and then the person that asks the questions at the end at least gets the opportunity to comment on it. But I found it a very helpful process to go through. It's Anybody else have any questions?
I'm curious about how people are seeing the relationship between, well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Beth.
Go ahead, Glenda.
I'm just curious about the same and different between what you're seeing spiral dynamics and HSD. I'm just curious about that, but we can get to that in a minute.
Go ahead, Bet.
Okay. So I am very interested in this, and I'm just wondering if we can put more information in the chat. By the way, I'm going to be editing this video in the next few days, so I will put all the links that we have in the chat into the show notes. So I just wanted to make that announcement, so I know people are trying to like capture all these amazing links. So go ahead and add details about where do we go to sign up, because I want to sign up for that event that you guys have every weekday. I don't think I'll go to it every day, but I definitely want to go to at least one, and any other relevant. And also, do you teach this as a class? Like, how do we learn more details on this?
But just real quickly, for the link to get the information about the inquiry, it's the last link that I put in, and it just takes you to a page in our website. If you scroll to the bottom of that, it says click here to register or something like that. It's free. They just register so that you can get the link each day. But it's on that page in the website. Yeah, Marie just put it back in. Thanks.
And then how do we learn more about this process? Do you have curriculum? Is it on the internet? Do you have to pay to go to a certification? Like, what do we do next?
We have lots of different levels of learning here. Like there's the inquiry each morning. The first Thursday of every month, we have a live virtual workshop where Glenda it's an hour long, it's open to the public, it's free. She takes a deep dive into a particular concept, and that's the first Thursday of every month. Marie, if you would put the link up to get to the learning opportunities.
Mhm.
Then we do about once a month, we have what we call an adaptive action lab. That is 2 3-hour sessions that takes a deeper dive into a particular aspect. So we have one on using HSD to consult, one on using HSD for planning, using HSD for facilitating, using it for coaching. But there's also one that we do more often, and it's just an introduction. We just finished one that's an introduction, and it's 6 hours, 2 3-hour sessions, 1 day apart. And that has that it costs $300 US, but there's a 30% discount for like nonprofits and academe and students. So those are the basic ways that we have public participation. There's the course, for instance, that Glenda and Michael and Marie are doing right now that's called Dragons. It's explaining some of the Western assumptions that really don't hold true in the real world. What else, Glenda? Wait, you're on mute.
Put myself on mute. We also have the certification training.
Right.
So there are 5 intensive days and then 4 months of online small group reading work together. We are in the middle of one of those. It's being done in Dutch, and we're starting one next week in the UK. And that's about becoming an HSD professional. We also have lots of materials on the website. So Royce, if you'll put the website address back in again. So if you go to resources, it's keyword searchable. So you can search and see what comes up. There are about more than 400 items in there, videos and blog posts and papers and things,
And we'll soon be posting
recordings.
the adaptive action labs for next year. They're not posted yet, but they will be soon. The only one we have left this year is on DEI,
What's DEI?
diversity, equity, and
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
no,
sorry.
that's okay. In fact, the man who's helping to teach it calls it JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So,
Thank you. Michael.
Hey, thank you. Hey, Paul, so I've been studying integral for many years, and I've been studying HSD pretty intensively and teaching it for the last couple of years. And I would just want to say that you have I really appreciated your approach, and I'd really like to get a copy of those slides if you're willing. It helped me. It was a lot of what I intuitively do, or position I usually think of for HSD, but it helped me reframe it in a different way. So I just want to really appreciate that from you.
I've got your email. I will email you the.
Okay, thank you very much. The other thing to say is that for me, at least, HSD is a very, it wasn't created out of integral something particularly, but it feels like it was. It feels like it was. It did emerge from an integral kind of understanding of the world. It's especially effective as a right-hand quadrant kind of a view of what to do. And as Glenda and Marie and I have been, doing our collaboration together, specifically presenting HSD material, but wrapping it with integral perspective. It's it just feels very it's just an integral mind. It brings that kind of a view to the world in terms of the tools and stuff. So I'd highly recommend it to people to explore more of that are in this group. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
So Freer.
Yeah, maybe I will try to answer Glenda. She asked about how do we see it from a spiral dynamics perspective or something like this. What was your question? You are muted. Glenda, you are muted.
I was wondering about what you saw as same and different between what Paul presented and integral. That's my question.
Yeah, so I first of all, I must admit that I'm not I cannot say I got the full gravity of this methodology, so maybe I'm wrong, but from my perspective, the first impression was that it was a blue system designed for orange, mainly for orange issues, companies and people that have goals, because when you go to purple and red, it's not about achieving goals. So maybe it will be difficult to work with purple, red in this system. I can say that the inquiry, the way you represent the inquiry, is the way you listen and the way you are catching the different point of view is pretty yellow. So there is a second tier involved in it from my perspective. But if I'm looking for like all the spiral, I'm not sure if this methodology will work with some levels of point of views, especially the purple, red, and green might be rejective to this kind of methodology. But this is only my impression.
Thank you, Sophia. Barbara.
Sorry, it really helps to unmute. I think that Saphir said it so much better than I did earlier. Yeah, the difference is Don Beck would have said this will not work at purple red, and so but I think, you know, it's other than that, it's very compatible. Unlike you, Saphir, I think of it as very green. It uses listening technologies and such, and you're right, you can sell it easily to blue orange. The question I have is somebody I think earlier mentioned ULabs, somebody from the UK area, right? And they use a little bit of spiral dynamics in some areas, but the one thing they use is rapid prototyping. And of all the things I got out of ULab, it was stop analyzing and push the system just a little bit, because to see what happens when you make a change, right? You know, it's like the Japanese Kaizen methods where you change the system a little bit and see how it reacts. Do you guys use that at all?
Yes, but it's not a random walk. So it's not just do something. It's iterative cycles focusing on the conditions for self-organizing. But
Yes,
absolutely,
no,
experimentation is key. Yeah.
Yeah, I would never consider it a random walk. Well, and unless I really knew I needed to know about how the system would react to A, right? And I hadn't a clue. And when I'd ask them, they just lied about it, you know, to put it not a nice face on it. So then I might just randomly push in the area of A to see what really happened to the system. But no, rapid prototyping, you're absolutely right. It's not random. It can't be random, right? Once you've seen a little bit of the system, you have enough to know what kind of changes to make to clarify what's going on, right?
Let me jump in here. And I apologize that I was not able to get every detail that comes out of HSD in the presentation. One of the aspects of the iterative nature of adaptive action, and again, it's core to adaptive action, is that the act, once you get to the now what element, you don't propose necessarily hideously complex solutions. In fact, it's within the model, it says come up with a simple solution that you can push in your adaptive action, observe what's go back, observe what's going on, and then do another adaptive action. The idea is if you don't need a complex solution, don't push a complex solution. In fact, keep the solutions as simple as possible. So in that respect, I think that's where I personally believe it can be very useful at even purple orange levels, because you're not imposing a solution from above. You're observing the patterns that come out of that context, and you are trying to draw out solutions that are within that context and keeping them as simple as possible. Because again, it's the iterative nature of HSD that really, I think, gives a lot of power. You're not pushing for some great strategic solution that's going to be implemented. You're looking for a next positive step. And because it's iterative, if the journey includes 2 or 3 steps, that's great, but it could include lots of steps. And most Western approaches don't include that.
So Paul, how big of a system do you envision using this in?
I don't know. I think what the example that I don't know. I mean,
I think I'm sorry to
no, go
interrupt.
ahead.
Paul.
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, I think it's important to sort of frame that HSD anyways is about working in open systems with high dimension, non-linear, non-causal. I mean, it is, in my impression, hugely scalable, and it's up to the complexity of the person's ability to hold certain scales anyways to make it useful. That's my impression of it.
And Barbara, we've had experience with systems at multiple levels. So one-on-one coaching, talking to finding solutions to wicked issues between in a conflicting between 2 people, for instance, or at a school or in a community, large organizations. The example Glenda gave a while ago is an international NGO. So we look at it can work. We've experienced it working in all of those scales.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be from helping kids learn to read. We've used it we have associates who have used it in literacy classes, and we've had people who are using it to talk about climate change on a global scale. So that's what Marie means when she says it scales. You can use it very close in, or you can go really large. Because the dynamics are the same at all those different scales, and that's what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Bet, did you have another question?
No, it's not really a question, but Paul, I can take your slides and put them as an open link on the internet, so that way everyone can get them and I can include it in the show notes.
How did you got to my slides?
No, you can email it to me and I'll upload it.
Okay, I'll email it to you and Michael the slides.
Great.
Thanks.
Sophia, did you have a question?
Yeah, you keep sharing.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Paul. It was a huge presentation. I feel like my head needs to grow about 3 times bigger to try and integrate and incorporate it. I look forward to watching the replay. And for Glenda and Royce and Mary and Michael also for your input. I'm fascinated, and I already thought that I already use creative inquiry from my own with my own design, I suppose, intuitive questions in my practice as a somatic coach. I also read an interesting article yesterday by Nora Bateson, and she's talking about the readiness and the preparedness of what she calls pre-emergence. And that more and more people are getting used to the idea now that there is this emergence into this field of uncertainty that we didn't know before. And I'm really looking forward to exploring HSD from within this lens, you know, to being able to use bits of all of it, perhaps to help me balance maybe more consciously, rather than what you just said, Glenda, about it wasn't random what you did. I'm a very random kind of questioner, but it would be interesting. So I'm really grateful to all of you for bringing this to light. Thanks.
I think that's what we would have to teach at school nowadays, huh?
Wouldn't that be much more interesting than what is on the existing curriculums?
Yes.
And good for our children and the future of the planet.
And for the teachers.
Yep. That's right.
Anybody
Yeah,
else?
I want to give a quick plug for Nora. She has a lot of stuff, and one of the things is Warm Data Labs. I'm pasting a link into the chat. So yeah, I listened to the debate on her and stage theories. It's actually extremely interesting, but we should maybe do a session on that some other time. But yeah, she's really great, and I think we can all appreciate and learn from her.
What is she talking about? From where she coming?
She's very right brain, and I think stage theory is very left brain. So she just doesn't like anything put into any boxes. She just doesn't like it. She hates it. So the little debate, or the debate, was about an hour long. It was interesting. It's just basically she's saying everything, no boundaries, don't put people in boxes, and the other guy's like, well, sometimes you need to have labels on things. It was just a funny right brain versus left brain. Like, some people hate personality typing, like, don't put me in a box. It's like, well, it's kind of useful sometimes. So if you do listen to that, I'll find the link for that. It was very hard to listen to because they are very contentious, although they're very respectful in the debate. But yeah, it's not the biggest deal, but she is really interesting. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts with her, and you should definitely, if you haven't paid attention to her, she's good to understand.
Yeah, she's lovely. And I think that all of us are wrestling with boundaries that are melting away or transforming, with variation, differences that we've never had to cope with before, some of us, and with kinds of connections that are just so fast and so ubiquitous that the state of our systems is shifting. And so we see lots of people coming from lots of directions, trying to reach for something that's useful and good. So Nora's work is lovely. And that place where she stands in the no boundary space, and the other very positivistic must have boundaries space. What we say is both of those are important. And the question is, which do you need to what degree and when? So that's the choice of finding fit, rather than optimizing one and judging the other. Yeah.
Well said, Glenda.
I would love to see you and Glenda and Nora do a podcast together.
That would be fun.
It would be so great. I don't know who would host it, but you should try to make that happen.
It would be fun. And I think Sophia had her hand up too.
No, not anymore. Sophia. Okay.
No, I just took it down again, but yes, Nora Bateson.
Barbara has her hand up.
You know, the one I'm a no boundaries person personally. You know, everything goes back to the beginning of the universe and out to when it's cold, empty space again. But Nora's stance just flies in the face of what we know about brain development, right? And so it's, you know, once you reach blue, yeah, no boundaries is an appropriate place to go, but that is actually neurological development. What little bit's been done shows that the brains are different and there's not neurons to process some of these no boundaries things. And so it seems as if it's a really important both and thing where we need to get our hearts around where the majority of humans in the world are today, which is blue and below, right? By the vast majority, even in the developed West. And so I'm thinking that maybe when we work with these theories, that the most important thing to consider is how will these play out, and how can we make life better for the majority of folks who think we're absolutely totally out of our gourds, right? Because these our airy-fairy theories are totally useless in their universe, not because they have an ideological aversion to them, but because their current neurology literally can't process them.
Go ahead, Christian.
Hold on one sec. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate your presentation, Paul. Yeah, I really enjoyed kind of like just getting a different perspective and kind of seeing like a different context to use, different ways of, understanding ourselves, understanding other people. Actually, so I noticed, because again, like I'm definitely still trying to integrate certain information from the past, from like my early training with spiral dynamics. One of the trainers, it was interesting, Glenda, you mentioned, you're noticing those patterns, with different people groups, if they're overly focused on like sameness or difference. So that pattern, that's a change pattern, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember I learned that from Wyatt Woodsmall. I don't know if you're familiar with Wyatt.
Not. Mm-mm.
Okay. Yeah, so he wrote a
Cool.
book, and he's the person that was co-training with the spiral dynamics concepts a few years. Well, yeah, I think it was like around 2008, 2009. But yeah, there was like a few different patterns, and he wrote a book called People Power Patterns, and one of them is change, and I think he had 4 distinctions within change. So there's the similarity pattern, difference pattern, qualified sameness, qualified difference.
Mm.
So there's a lot of distinctions there of where people are at, and then there's like I think even I mentioned it in my intro how spiral dynamics is, again, like from my perspective, how I use it is, I try to understand people's, where they're coming from, where I can meet them where they're at, and understand deeper like their motives and motivations. And motives and motivations are 2 separate patterns within people pattern recognition. So, and again, like even for me at this stage in my life, I'm definitely doing a lot more internal work, healing, understanding different cultural contexts and history. Because again, I grew up, for most people in that haven't been in this group, like most people here that have been in the group already know me, know kind of like my past. But again, like I grew up Mormon. So again, like I grew up in a very poor, context. And then understanding more of my indigenous roots, again, understanding the history of colonization and like trying to get a broader, bigger picture of, what happened in Canada, what happened in the US, what happened in Mexico, understanding all those, what are the same and different dynamics throughout history. So again, like even last night I was I was invited to a UNLV class, and again, like a friend of mine, she's from the Philippines. She's a nurse from the Philippines, and they were doing like a class on Filipino superstitions and spirituality. And again, it's the same thing in the Philippines. Like there's definitely like a history of colonization, a history of just kind of like, even in this group, they were doing a lot of decolonizing and like understanding, getting back to their roots. So it was interesting kind of seeing, the sameness and difference within that as well. So,
Could you put the name of that author in the chat?
oh
I'd
yeah,
appreciate that. Yeah, thanks. And
will do.
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
We're coming up on the official end of this session at 11 o'clock or the top of the hour. We're officially at the top of the hour here, and I want to thank all the participants. This has been a very lively group, and I especially want to thank Glenda and Royce and Michael and Marie for supporting me from the HSD perspective. So again, this will be posted on our YouTube channel, and anybody who wants to circle back and watch it, please do that. Thank you.